Jake Morrison woke up at sunrise, like he had every day for the past 3 years. The twin suns of New Haven painted his small cabin in golden light as he pulled on his work boots and headed outside. The air smelled of fresh wheat and morning dew. His farm stretched out before him in neat rows of green crops that swayed gently in the breeze. This was exactly what he wanted after 20 years of war. No explosions, no screaming, no friends dying in his arms. Just peace and quiet on. A world so far from Earth that most people had never heard of it. Jake was 42 years old and tired of fighting. The Krillian Wars had ended 5 years ago, but the nightmares still came sometimes. Out here, working the soil with his own hands, he could forget about plasma rifles and burning ships. He walked through his wheat field, checking for signs of disease or pests. The crop was coming along well. In a few weeks, he would harvest it and sell it to the local trading post. The money was not much, but it was enough to keep him fed and his small cabin warm. He did not need much anymore. Jake was heading back to the house for breakfast when he heard the sound. It started as a distant whistle, then grew louder and more urgent. He looked up at the clear blue sky and saw something falling fast. Smoke trailed behind it like a black scar across the morning. The object was heading straight for his wheat field. He ran toward the house and grabbed the old military binoculars. From his porch, through the lenses, he could see it was an escape pod. The hull was burned and twisted, with alien markings he recognized from the war. It hit the ground with a tremendous crash that shook the windows of his cabin. A cloud of dirt and debris rose into the air. Jake stood there for a moment, staring at the smoking crater in his wheat field. Part of him wanted to walk away and pretend he had not seen anything. He had left the military for a reason. He did not want to get involved in anything that might drag him back into that world. But another part of him, the part that had made him a good soldier, would not let him ignore someone who might be hurt. He grabbed his old medkit from the cabin and jogged across the field. The escape pod had carved a deep furrow through his crops, destroying weeks of work. The metal hull was still hot and hissing. Through a cracked viewport, he could see movement inside. Jake found the emergency release and pulled the hatch open. Smoke poured out, making him cough. When it cleared, he saw her. She was tall and slender, with silver blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Her hair was white as snow and hung down to her shoulders. Large violet eyes looked up at him with a mixture of pain and confusion. She was Vethron. Jake had worked with a few veterans during the war, though they had kept mostly to themselves. They were all eyes, but strange ones. Their technology was far ahead of human science, and their culture was a mystery that most humans never bothered to understand. The woman tried to sit up and winced. There was blood on her forehead, and her left arm hung at an odd angle. Jake knelt down beside the pod and opened his medkit. "Do not move," he said. "You are hurt." She looked at him with those large violet eyes and said something in her own language. Her voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Then she switched to English, though her accent made the words sound formal and distant. "You are human," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, my name is Jake. You crashed in my field. Let me help you." She studied his face for a long moment, as if she was trying to decide something important. Finally, she nodded. Jake cleaned the cut on her forehead and checked her arm. It was broken, but not badly. He made a simple sling from his shirt and helped her out of the pod. She was taller than him by several inches and moved with a grace that seemed impossible despite her injuries. "What is your name?" Jake asked as he helped her walk toward his cabin. "I am called Zara," she said. "I require shelter while I contact my people." Jake nodded. He had a spare room that he used for storage. It would not be comfortable, but it was better than sleeping outside. He helped her into the house and settled her on his old couch. "I will make some tea," Jake said. Zara looked around his simple cabin with obvious disapproval. Her eyes took in the plain wooden furniture, the faded photographs on the walls, and the stack of farming books on his table. "This dwelling is quite primitive," she said, "but it will suffice for now." Jake felt his jaw tighten. He had not asked for a house guest, especially one who seemed to think his home was not good enough for her. But she was hurt and far from her own people. The right thing to do was help her, even if she was rude about it. He made tea and brought it to her. She took a sip and made a face. "This beverage is bitter and unpleasant," she said. "Do you have anything more suitable?" Jake gritted his teeth. "It is all I have." Zara sighed as if she was dealing with a difficult child. "I suppose it will have to do. Servant, you may prepare a meal now. Something simple but nutritious." Jake stopped in the middle of reaching for his own cup. "Excuse me?" "A meal," Zara repeated slowly, as if he had not understood. "I require nourishment. After my ordeal. Did you just call me servant?" Zara tilted her head, looking confused by his reaction. "Of course. You have offered me shelter, which makes you my host. As my host, you serve my needs while I am your guest. This is the proper way." Jake stared at her. In all his years of military service, he had never met anyone with such casual arrogance. "Lady, I am helping you because you are hurt, not because. I am your servant." "The terminology is unimportant," Zara said with a wave of her good hand. "You will provide for my needs, and I will accept your service graciously. Now, about that meal." Jake opened his mouth to tell her exactly what she could do with her attitude, but then he looked at her injuries and the exhaustion in her violet eyes. She was alone and hurt on a strange world. Maybe this was just how her people did things. He would give her a day or two to contact her people and leave. Then he could get back to his peaceful life. "Fine," Jake said. "I will make something." As he walked to the kitchen, he wondered what he had gotten himself into. 3 days passed, and Zara showed no signs of leaving. She had taken over Jake's spare room and rearranged everything according to what she called proper efficiency standards. His tools were now organized by size and function in ways that made no sense to him. His clothes were folded in precise geometric patterns that looked more like art than laundry dot every morning. She would emerge from her room and announce what she needed. "Servant Jake, prepare the morning meal." "Servant Jake, these garments require cleaning." "Servant Jake, your dwelling lacks proper ventilation." She said everything in that same calm, musical voice, as if she were commenting on the weather. Jake found himself grinding his teeth more often. He had tried explaining that he was not her servant, but she just looked at him with those violet eyes and nodded politely, then continued giving orders. She seemed genuinely confused by his frustration, which somehow made it worse. On the 4th morning, Jake was making breakfast when he noticed Zara had not come out of her room yet. Usually, she appeared at exactly sunrise to critique his cooking and suggest improvements. He knocked on her door. "Zara, are you awake?" There was no answer. Jake pushed the door open slightly and peered inside. Zara was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window with a blank expression. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Are you all right?" Jake asked. She turned toward him, and for a moment her careful composure cracked. Her eyes were wide and frightened, like someone who had just woken from a terrible nightmare. "I am fine," she said quickly, but her voice was not as steady as usual. "I was simply observing the sunrise. Your planet has interesting atmospheric conditions." Jake had seen that look before, in mirrors, in the faces of other soldiers who had been through too much. He recognized the signs of someone trying very hard to hold themselves together. Bad dreams? he asked quietly. Zara's hands stopped shaking, and she straightened her shoulders. I do not have dreams. Vethrans have superior mental discipline. But Jake had heard her crying out in her sleep the night before, words in her own language, spoken with desperate urgency. He did not push the subject. Later that day, while Zara was reorganizing his kitchen cabinets without permission, Jake decided to take a closer look at her escape pod. He had avoided it since the crash, but his curiosity was getting stronger. The hull was covered in burn marks that looked like weapon damage, not accident damage. Inside the pod, he found something that made his blood run cold. Hidden behind a panel were data crystals marked with military symbols he recognized from the war. These were not passenger belongings. They were classified intelligence materials. That evening, Jake confronted her. Who are you really? Zara was. Using his toothbrush again, something that had stopped bothering him as much as it should have. She looked at him in the bathroom mirror with foam around her mouth. I am Zara, as I told you, she said after rinsing. You are not just some refugee. I found military data in your pod. Zara went very still. For a long moment, she did not say anything. Then she walked past him into the main room and sat down on his couch. I was a military engineer, she said finally. I designed quantum drive systems for Vethran ships during the war. Jake felt his stomach drop. Vethran quantum drives were the technology that had turned the tide against the Krullians. Without them, humanity would have lost the war. What are you doing here? Jake asked. Running, Zara said simply. From my own people and from yours. She explained that she had discovered something that changed everything. The Krullians had not simply lost the war and retreated to their home systems. They had been preparing for years, building new weapons and finding ways to strike back. Worse, they had learned to use quantum tunnel technology to move through space undetected. They are planning an attack, Zara said, much larger than anything they attempted during the war. They have been infiltrating human space for months, setting up staging areas and gathering intelligence. Jake sat down heavily. Why are you telling me this? Why not go to your government or mine? Because neither side trusts me now, Zara said. Her voice was bitter. My people believe I have betrayed Vethran neutrality by warning humans. Your people believe I am a spy trying to manipulate them. The data I carry proves the threat is real, but no one wants to listen. What kind of data? Zara hesitated then, seemed to make a decision. Technical specifications for their new weapons, locations of their hidden bases, and timing for their attack. But more importantly, the design for a defense system that could stop them. What kind of defense system? One that requires both human and Vethran technology to work, Zara said. Your people have adaptability and tactical creativity that we lack. We have precision and technical knowledge that you need. Together, we could build something that neither species could create alone. Jake stared at her. That is why you are here. You need a human to help you. Not just any human, Zara. Syed, I need someone with military experience who understands both species. Someone who fought in the war, but is no longer bound by military command structure. Someone who might be willing to help save both our peoples. Why me? Because you offered me shelter when you could have walked away, Zara said. Because you have been patient with my cultural differences, even when they frustrate you. Because you understand what war costs and what peace is worth. Jake felt the weight of her words settling on his shoulders like a heavy pack. He had come to New Haven to escape the war, not to get pulled back into it. How long do we have? He asked. Weeks, perhaps less, Zara said. The attack will come when their staging areas are fully prepared. Once it begins, it will be too late to deploy. The defense system. That night, Jake lay awake staring at the ceiling. In the next room, He could hear Zara moving around restlessly. Sometimes she spoke in her own language, words that sounded like prayers or apologies. He thought about his peaceful farm and his simple life. He thought about his friends who had died in the war, believing they had won something lasting. He thought about all the humans and veterans who would die if Zara was right about the coming attack. When morning came, Jake found Zara in the kitchen making breakfast. She had learned to cook human food over the past few days, though she insisted on adding veteran spices that made everything taste like flowers. "Servant Jake," she said as he sat down. Then she paused and looked at him carefully. "Jake, I have been thinking about what you said regarding proper terminology." It was the first time she had used his name without the word servant in front of it. "I have also been thinking," Jake said, "about what you told me last night." Zara waited, her violet eyes watching his face. "If what you say is true, then my peaceful retirement was always going to be temporary," Jake said. "The war was never really over." "No," Zara agreed quietly. "It was not." Jake ate his flour-flavored eggs and made his decision. What do we need to do? Jake had just finished packing supplies when the first ship appeared on the horizon. It was sleek and silver, moving with the smooth silence that marked Vetheron technology. As it descended toward his farm, 2 more ships followed behind it. "They found me," Zara said quietly. She was standing by the window, watching the approaching vessels with calm resignation. "I had hoped for more time. Who are they?" Jake asked, checking his old service rifle. "Retrieval specialists," Zara replied. "They will try to take me alive, but they will not hesitate to kill you if you interfere." Jake moved to another window and saw additional movement in the distance. Human military vehicles were approaching from the opposite direction, kicking up clouds of dust as they raced across the open ground toward his farm. "Looks like your people and mine had the same idea," Jake said. The veteran ships landed in his wheat field, crushing weeks of careful work under their landing gear. Armed figures in environmental suits emerged and began moving toward the cabin. In precise formation, they carried weapons that hummed with contained energy. The human vehicles stopped at the edge of Jake's property. Soldiers poured out and took defensive positions behind their transports. Jake could see the insignia of Special Operations Command on their uniforms. These were not regular army troops. "Both sides want the data you carry," Jake realized. "Yes," Zara said, "and neither side cares whether we survive the retrieval." Jake felt the familiar weight of combat settling over him. His peaceful retirement was officially over. "Is there another way out of here?" "The root cellar behind your dwelling connects to an old irrigation tunnel," Zara said. "I studied your property's layout while you were working." "Of course you did," Jake muttered. The Vetheron retrieval team reached the cabin first. One of them activated a translation device and spoke in accented English. "Zara of the 3rd Engineering Collective, you will surrender yourself and the stolen materials immediately. Compliance will result in merciful judgment." Through the front window, Jake could see the human commander raising a megaphone. "This is Colonel Brooks of the Terran Defense Force. We are here to secure alien technology that poses a threat to human security. Surrender peacefully, and you will be treated according to interplanetary law." "They are both lying," Zara said calmly. The shooting started when one of the human soldiers tried to move closer to the cabin. A Vetheran guard fired a warning shot that vaporized a fence post. The humans responded with automatic weapon fire. Soon both sides were exchanging shots across Jake's property, using his cabin as cover. "Time to go," Jake said. He grabbed his pack and rifle while Zara collected the data crystals from their hiding place. They crawled across the floor to avoid the energy beams and bullets that were starting to punch through the walls. The root cellar was accessed through a trapdoor in Jake's kitchen floor. It was a small space where he stored vegetables, through the winter months. The irrigation tunnel Zara had mentioned was barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, but it led away. From the battle toward the hills behind his property dot, as they squeezed through the tunnel, Jake could hear his cabin being torn apart above them. Windows shattered and walls cracked under the sustained fire from both sides. He thought about his peaceful mornings, his carefully tended crops, and his simple furniture. Everything he had built to replace the war was being destroyed by the war's return. They emerged from the tunnel about 200 meters from the cabin, hidden by a small rise in the ground. Jake's home was barely recognizable. The roof had partially collapsed, and smoke was rising from several fires. Both sides had taken cover behind whatever remained standing and were engaged in a fierce firefight. "My home," Jake said quietly. "I am sorry," Zara said, and for the first time since he had met her, she sounded genuinely regretful. "This is my fault." "No," Jake replied after a moment. "This started long before you crashed in my field." They moved carefully through the hills, staying low and using the natural terrain for cover. Behind them, the battle for Jake's farm continued. Occasionally, they heard explosions as someone used heavier weapons. "Where are we going?" Jake asked as they climbed higher into the rocky hills. "The planetary capital," Zara said. "There are people there who might listen to us. If we can reach them before both our peoples decide we are too dangerous to live." Jake knew the capital was 3 days away, on foot through rough terrain. They would have to avoid roads and settlements, living off what they could carry and find along the way. It would be like the war all over again, except this time he was running from his own people as well as aliens. That night, they made camp in a cave high in the hills. Jake had managed to start a small fire using dry wood that would produce minimal smoke. The flames danced on the rocky walls while they shared a meal of field rations and water. "Tell me about the defense system," Jake said. Zara pulled out one of the data crystals and held it up to the firelight. "It requires quantum resonance generators to create a network of overlapping fields. The generators themselves need Vethran. Precision engineering, but the network coordination requires human tactical thinking." "Why?" "Because you think differently than we do," Zara explained. "When Vethrans plan a defense, we calculate optimal positions and create perfect geometric patterns. But humans adapt and improvise. You see possibilities that our mathematical models miss." Jake studied her face in the firelight. "You really believe this will work?" "I have seen what humans can accomplish when they are properly motivated," Zara said. "During the war, I watched your soldiers find solutions that our computers said were impossible. You have a gift for making the impossible merely difficult. And if no one will listen to us?" Zara was quiet for a long moment. "Then both our species will learn the hard way that some wars never truly end." As they settled down to sleep, Jake found himself thinking about the battle at his farm. He had seen how Zara moved during their escape, flowing through the tunnel, with impossible grace and emerging ready to fight or run as needed. She had consistently put herself between him and danger, even though he was supposedly just a servant providing her with temporary shelter. "Zara," he said quietly. "Yes?" "When you called me servant, was that really about your culture?" She did not answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual. "Among my people, the servant bond is not about superiority," she said. "It is about trust. When someone accepts you as their guest and agrees to serve your needs, they are saying they will protect you and provide for you no matter what it costs them. In return, the guest must treasure that service and never abuse it. So when I offered you shelter, you offered me much more than you realized," Zara said. "And I accepted it in the way my people understand such things. Perhaps I should have explained better." Jake thought about that as he drifted off to sleep. In the distance, he could still see the glow from fires burning at his farm. His old life was literally going up in smoke, but maybe something better was being born from the ashes. Tomorrow, they would continue toward the capital, carrying data that might save both their species from a war that was already beginning, whether anyone wanted to admit it or not. On the second day of their journey to the capital, Jake began to understand that Zara was not just different from humans. She was different from other veterans too. They had been walking through dense forest when she suddenly stopped and tilted her head, listening to something Jake could not hear. Her violet eyes went wide with alarm. "Hunters," she whispered. "My people have sent hunters." "What is the difference between hunters and the soldiers at my farm?" Jake asked. "The soldiers wanted to capture me alive for questioning," Zara explained, as she led him off the trail toward thicker underbrush. "Hunters have been told I am too dangerous to take alive." They hid behind a fallen log while three figures in camouflaged environmental suits moved silently through the trees. Jake had to admit their stealth was impressive. If Zara had not heard them coming, they would have walked right into an ambush. Hunters moved with deadly precision, checking every possible hiding spot with methodical thoroughness. They carried weapons that made no sound but left smoking holes in whatever they pointed at. Jake had seen similar weapons during the war, but these looked more advanced. One of the hunters stopped near their hiding place and said something in the Vithron language. His voice was cold and mechanical through the suit's translator. Zara responded in her own tongue, speaking rapidly with obvious emotion. Jake could not understand the words, but he could hear the urgency in her voice. The hunter's response was sharp and final. He raised his weapon toward their hiding place. Zara stood up slowly, her hands visible and empty. She spoke again in Vethran, but this time her voice carried a tone of authority that Jake had never heard before. The hunter hesitated. The other two moved closer, their weapons also trained on Zara. They had a brief conversation in their musical language while Jake crouched behind the log, feeling helpless. Finally, the lead hunter lowered his weapon slightly. He spoke to Zara one more time, then gestured for the others to follow him. They disappeared into the forest as silently as they had come. Zara sank down beside Jake, trembling slightly. "What did you tell them?" Jake asked. "That you were under my protection, according to the old laws," Zara said. "That harming you would bring dishonor to their families for 7 generations. "And they believed you?" "They believed I was serious about defending you," Zara replied. "That was enough to make them reconsider." "Why would you do that? You could have gone with them and been safe." Zara looked at him with those large violet eyes, and Jake saw something in them that surprised him. It was not just gratitude or alien politeness. It was genuine affection. "Because you are not just my host anymore," she said quietly. "You are my chosen companion." As they continued toward the capital, Jake found himself paying more attention to the small things Zara did. She always made sure he had enough water before drinking herself. When they stopped to rest, she positioned herself where she could watch for threats from multiple directions. At night, she took the first watch and let him sleep. These were not the actions of someone who thought he was her servant. They were the actions of someone who cared about his well-being. "Tell me about your home," Jake said as they walked through a valley filled with purple flowers that reminded him of her eyes. "Vethros is a world of crystal cities and flowing water." Zara said, "Everything is designed for harmony and efficiency. There is no waste, no chaos, no unpredictability." "Sounds peaceful." "It is," Zara agreed, "but it is also sterile. We have eliminated most sources of conflict, but we have also eliminated most sources of growth. We are a people who have achieved perfection and found it boring." "Is that why you helped humans during the war?" "Partly," Zara said. "Working with humans was like being exposed to a wonderful madness. You solve problems in ways that should not work, but somehow do. You take impossible risks and succeed through sheer determination. You are everything we are not. We are also messy and violent and unpredictable. Yes, Zara said with something that might have been a smile. That too, that evening they were ambushed by human soldiers. Jake recognized them as mercenaries rather than regular military by their mixed equipment and casual discipline. Someone was paying them to capture Zara and her data, but Jake doubted it was the official government. The attack came without warning. Jake heard the whistle of an incoming projectile and tackled Zara to the ground just as an explosive round detonated where she had been standing. Dirt and rocks showered down on them as more rounds impacted nearby. "Stay down," Jake shouted, but Zara was already moving dot. She flowed across the uneven ground like liquid silver, using natural cover within grace that made human soldiers look clumsy by comparison. Her injured arm had healed enough that she could use both hands, and Jake watched in amazement as she returned fire with a small energy weapon he had not known she was carrying. But what impressed him most was how she fought. Every shot she took was precisely aimed to disable rather than kill. Every movement was calculated to protect Jake as well as herself. She could have escaped alone easily, but she stayed to fight alongside him. The battle was brief but intense. When it was over, 3 mercenaries were unconscious, and 2 had fled back toward the road. Jake had a shallow cut on his forehead, and Zara had a burn mark on her shoulder where an energy beam had grazed her. "You could have run," Jake said as he bandaged her wound. "So could you," Zara replied. Jake realized she was right. When the shooting started, his first instinct had been to protect her, not to save himself. Somewhere along the way, this strange alien woman had become someone worth fighting for. "Why did you really leave your home?" Jake asked as they treated each other's injuries. Zara was quiet for a long time. When she finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I discovered that my people knew about the Krillian threat and chose to do nothing," she said. "They decided it was better to let humans fight and die while veterans remained safely neutral. I could not accept that. So you stole the data and ran." "I took information that belonged to both our species and tried to give it to those who would use it to save lives," Zara corrected. "My people call that theft and treason. I call it doing what is right." Jake looked at this alien woman who had sacrificed everything to warn his species about a threat that would kill millions. She had given up her home, her people, and her safety to do what she believed was right. And she still called him by his name instead of servant, though he was beginning to understand that in her culture there might not be much difference between the two concepts. "When this is over," Jake said, "what will you do?" "You cannot go home." "I do not know," Zara admitted. "I had not thought beyond warning your people and mine about the coming attack. Perhaps I will find a place like your farm, somewhere quiet, where I can grow things instead of building weapons." "You would be welcome to stay with me," Jake said. "After we save both our species and rebuild my cabin, of course." Zara looked at him with surprise. "You would want that? Even after everything I have put you through?" Jake thought about his peaceful mornings that were now just memories, his burned cabin and his destroyed crops. Then he thought about Zara, using his toothbrush with complete unconsciousness, reorganizing his possessions with alien efficiency, and calling him servant while treating him like family. "Yes," he said, "I think I would like that very much." For the first time since he had met her, Zara smiled. It was a real smile, not the polite expression she used when dealing with cultural differences. It lit up her entire face and made her violet eyes sparkle like stars. "Then we had better make sure we both survive long enough to build that cabin," she said. The capital city of New Haven stretched across a wide valley, its buildings gleaming in the afternoon sun. Jake and Zara looked down from the hills above, planning their approach carefully. They had been traveling for 5 days, and time was running out. The Krillian attack fleet will be in position within 48 hours, Zara said, studying the data crystal in her palm. If we cannot convince both governments to work together by then, it will be too late to deploy the defense network. Jake used his old military binoculars to scan the city below. He could see additional security forces at every checkpoint and military vehicles patrolling the streets. Word of their escape had clearly reached the capital. There, he pointed, to a cluster of buildings near the city center, the embassy district. If we can reach the Vethron diplomatic compound, maybe we can find someone who will listen. The ambassador will not see me, Zara said. I am considered a traitor by my government. Then we make them see both of us, Jake replied, together. They waited until dark before moving into the city. Jake's military training helped them avoid the patrols, while Zara's knowledge of surveillance technology kept them hidden from the sensors that monitored key intersections. They moved through back alleys and maintenance tunnels, getting closer to their destination, one careful step at a time. The Vethran embassy was a graceful spire of crystal and metal that seemed to glow with its own inner light. It was surrounded by gardens that followed geometric patterns too perfect to be natural. Guards in environmental suits patrolled the perimeter, but they were watching for external threats, not for someone trying to get inside. The service entrance, Zara whispered, pointing to a small door hidden behind decorative plants. I worked on the embassy security systems during the war. The lock will recognize my genetic signature. The door opened silently at Zara's touch. They slipped inside and found themselves in a maintenance corridor that ran beneath the main building. The walls were covered with flowing Vethron script that seemed to move in the dim light. This way, Zara said, leading him toward what she hoped was still the ambassador's private office. They emerged into a room that took Jake's breath away. The ceiling was transparent, showing the stars above in perfect clarity. The walls were covered with living art that shifted colors and patterns as they watched. In the center of the room, a tall veteran in formal robes sat behind a desk that appeared to be carved from a single enormous crystal dot. Ambassador Kellen looked up as they entered, his violet eyes widening with recognition and what might have been disappointment. Zara of the 3rd Engineering Collective, he said in accented English. You are far from where you should be. I am exactly where I need to be, Zara replied. The Krillians are coming, Kellen. In less than 2 days, they will launch the largest attack in the history of both our species. The ambassador studied Jake with obvious curiosity. And you bring a human witness to support your claims? I bring a human partner, Zara corrected. Someone who understands what we are facing and what it will take to stop it. Jake stepped forward. Your Excellency, I am Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morrison, retired. I fought in the Krillian Wars, and I have seen the intelligence data that Zara carries. The threat is real.